This next question was sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Alex in Bucharest, Romania. I've rarely heard you talk about Hulk Hogan on the show. When it will all be said and done, he wrote sad and done, but I think he means said.
Either might apply.
When it will all be said and done, will Hogan be considered a positive or negative influence on the business? I know he's been the poster kid for the WWF's mid-1980s boom and was the main weapon with which Vince destroyed the territories, but at the same time, he took the business, at least commercially, to places it's never been before. What's your take on the legacy of Hulk Hogan?
Well, but now I agree with everything else until he took the places the business places it's never been before. Did Hulk Hogan really take the business any place it had never been before? Besides, pay-per-view, but that wasn't invented any time before. Wrestling had been on network TV in the 50s and done bigger numbers, bigger viewership. Other wrestlers had drawn bigger houses for the time period, or bigger houses in specific markets because they were regional and not national, than Hogan. Hogan was the guy that led the first national expansion for Vince and was the guy. And I don't think it's going to be like a horrible legacy, like, oh God, Hulk Hogan was the worst thing that ever happened to wrestling. He was a big draw, one of the biggest ever, along with Austin and fucking Londos, and who is it now? Is Londos? Who was number 2? Was it Londos? Fuck, I did a column on this, but anyway, Long's still in the number 4 position. Was Hogan number 3? Or was he number 2? I can't remember. But anyway, as far as bigger draws in history, but he's also going to be remembered as the start of the cartoon wrestling that ran, a lot of the fans off. So many of them that we've talked about that listen to this program. So I don't think he's going to be a savior or the biggest menace ever. He's going to be one of the top box office attractions, but he was not the biggest movie star ever to be a wrestler. That would be The Rock now. And here's another thing. In the first network run, all the wrestlers, as related to other sports figures, other professional athletes, the wrestlers were the highest paid. Hogan in the 80s wasn't making more money than Michael Jordan, so he did not lead a salary renaissance for wrestling. He made a lot, but he still think about this. The guys like Gorgeous George for that short period of time, Thez because he was the NWA champion, Gagne and a few of those guys off the Chicago network TV, they made more money than any football player, basketball player, baseball player. Hogan made a ton of money, but he wasn't in that fucking stratosphere 30 years later. So it just, some people have said Hulk Hogan is the greatest name ever in wrestling, and it wasn't the case. Even mainstream Londos was bigger in his time. But also, the people who blame Hogan for being the fucking figurehead for cartoon ice cream bar bullshit wrestling also have to acknowledge how much money he drew and how big he was during that time period. So I say, he wasn't the greatest thing ever, and he wasn't a total shits.
There's plenty you could blame Hulk Hogan for, but in terms of the way he was marketed, that's Vince, not him. I mean,
yeah,
Vince could have tried to run with him the way he was used in the AWA and not make him overly cartoony, literally, the star of a cartoon. But they went a different way.
Well, but also Hulk loved it because here's the thing. Once you make a guy that important and at his size, he couldn't do anything where he's going to get hurt. So that's another reason why he had to, John Cena, much more athletic and did a lot more shit in OVW. But once he got over, they said, don't do a lot of that shit because if you get hurt, it'll cost us millions of dollars. So sometimes the guys, and then there's a guy like Flair who led the fucking company and did everything he fucking could because he was a goddamn space alien and you couldn't put him out of action. But not everybody was like that.
What do you think about the story where Vince, under oath in the Jesse Ventura trial, revealed that Hulk Hogan was the one who let him know that Ventura was trying to unionize?
Well, yeah. Why wouldn't he? Because Hulk was the guy. He was Vince's guy. The more money the WWF made, the more money Hulk Hogan was going to make. And the more that he could keep Vince McMahon on his fucking side, the better figured in he was. So, of course, he's going to rat out the fucking boys because he was the guy figured in. It was like including the booker on your fucking mutiny plans in the locker room. That's why once one of the boys became a booker, the boys didn't treat him like one of the boys anymore. Because now he's in the office.
Would anyone ever talk about Hogan in the Crockett locker room?
Not that many of the guys at that point in time actually knew him. So I didn't hear a lot of people talking about him personally.
Dusty knew him.
Dusty wasn't going to sit down and have long dissertations in the locker room about the pros and cons of Hulk Hogan. I mean, everybody basically rolled their eyes at. And Flair, the famous, I'm still in the fucking ring when you're back at the hotel ordering room service. Because I do, 45 minutes, you do 4.5 or whatever. Just a lot of eye rolling and, God, the matches fucking stink. But, he could talk and they knew he was fucking drawing, but no, there was not a lot of respect for any in-ring performances or whatever.
Do you see much influence of Hulk Hogan in today's wrestling?
Honestly, no. It would probably be better if there was. No, because the concepts were as old as the wrestling business. A fucking big, good-looking guy that has the fans, my little Hulkamaniacs, talks good about the fans and fucking fights for truth, justice, and the American way. And it just so happens to be bigger than your normal baby face, so we'll find some fucking monsters and assholes and, giants to fuck with him and get sympathy on him. The only thing that changed there was when Hulk Hogan started saying that he wasn't really fucking Hulk Hogan and it was all a fucking show. And going along with, and the first it was a wink wink and then it was the outright statements. That's the only thing that differentiated Hulk Hogan from anything that had happened in the wrestling business the previous 100 years. The way he was pushed, the way he worked, the promos he cut, that was all classic wrestling shit. You just never, he suddenly got in movies and he and Vince, fed off each other, I'm sure, because their egos are both fucking ginormous. And they became bigger than wrestling. Now Hulk's a movie star and Vince is the Walt Disney of wrestling and blah, blah, blah. And then he starts going around basically saying, I'm just playing a character. That's where that Hulk Hogan differentiated from anything else in wrestling up to that time. And it helped him in the entertainment business and it shit on the wrestling business and started the downhill slide that we're currently at the bottom of. So anything else that they could have taken from Hulk Hogan besides that would have been great because he was a master of psychology and he could do the little things and he could control a crowd and he could talk people in the building, blah, blah, blah. But instead, the impact today is, like you said the other day, it would have been better off if more wrestlers had watched more Bret Hart and less Shawn Michaels. But they've passed Michaels now. And they're copying the shit that they've seen on television in the mid-2000s, when the only people watching wrestling were people who loved it for the fucking art form, and whether it was a work or not was immaterial because they couldn't conceive of wrestling being big and mainstream because it was this little fucking teeny thing that they liked to watch on television, and they were in on it. And now that's who are either in the ring or in some cases in the back in the office in charge of the fucking thing. The people who saw wrestling when it, particularly for the performance, when it was the least popular it's been pretty much ever. After WCW folded, ECW went away, and the WWE started hiring all the fucking TV writers. And that's the influence I see today. And that's why it's all interchangeable and fucking looks the same and is rotten.
So to sum it up, what's Hulk Hogan's legacy?
With me, neither here nor there. He was a big mainstream fucking star, and I'll give him that, but he didn't invent anything, and he didn't really change anything. He was just the guy on top when the promoter that changed everything.
Do you think anyone else could have been in that position and had the same success, or was it unique to Hulk Hogan?
Probably pretty unique to Hulk Hogan. I'm not saying, we've talked about this, I'm not saying Vince could have done it with anybody. I don't know he could have done it with anybody else. Maybe he could have done it with Austin Idol. We'll never know. But Hogan didn't invent anything in the wrestling business. It's never been so huge and put on national TV before like that.